Oh, I know. Hello, everybody. I want to call the September 22nd, 2016 meeting of the Vermont Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel to order. My name is Kate O'Connor, and I am the chair of the panel. And I think what we'll do is go around and make some introductions, and then I'll have a little, fill people in on some of what's been going on. And I know, Tony, we have one person on the phone, so I don't want to forget her. Joe, do you want to start, since you're on this end, and just introduce, we're doing the introductions.
Sure, I'm Joe Lynch, Government Manager for Entergy Vermont Yankee, sitting in for Jack Boyle.
I'm McKenney, I'm the Technical Coordinator for Decommissioning.
Steve Skibniowski, representing the town of Vernon, and Vernon Board of Selectmen.
Jim Tonkovich, citizen appointee.
Chris Campin, Executive Director, Wyndham Regional Commission.
Jim Matto, citizen member.
George Dash, Department of Environmental Conservation.
David Andrews, representing the IBEW, the Workers of Vermont Yankee.
Derek Jordan, citizen appointee.
Diane Becker, representing the state of New Hampshire.
David Dean, appointee by the Speaker of the House.
And I want to, Lucy, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
We can. And
Okay, so here you have Lucy LaRiche, Secretary, Agency of Commerce and Community Development, filling in, well, not filling in, but taking over for Pat Moulton.
thank you, Lucy. We're glad you've joined us, and we hope you find the meeting as interesting as we do. So, and if you...
Sure I will.
And I'm
Sorry,
gonna-
I couldn't be there in person for this one. My afternoon schedule wouldn't allow enough travel time to get there.
No worries, and if any time, I try to remember the people on the phone, but sometimes I forget, so don't hesitate to just butt in if you need to. We take no
Okay,
offense.
no
We take
problem.
no offense to that here. As you know, there are two changes. As Lucy said, Pat Moulton has left to become the interim president of Vermont Technical College, and we applaud her for that. And I don't know if everybody heard this morning, Trey Martin is going to be, in about a week from now, he is going to be the new Secretary of Administration. He was appointed to that position by Governor Shumlin because the current Secretary of Administration is retiring or leaving the administration. So that's going to be another change that we have. There are several people who are absent tonight. It is for no other reason, but they've had some things that they've had to do on short notice. So I think those are the major changes that we're going to see, at least for right now, on the panel. We're going to have, this may be a shorter agenda if everyone looks at it. If we manage it properly, we might be able to get out at 8:30, but of course, we don't want to cut off public participation, so if we have to go to our regularly scheduled 9 o'clock, we will do that. We're going to have the traditional decommissioning updates from Entergy and the state of Vermont. Entergy is also going to give us a water management update. Then we're going to have the people from, or some staff members from the Vermont Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security who are going to talk to us about the new emergency plan. Then I want to have a discussion about how we move forward. We have about, 4 months left of this year, so we want to plan it wisely. Now for the minutes. We've been waiting for the minutes, and we finally, thanks to our wonderful note taker, Elizabeth Aquaviva, we are catching up. I sent around the minutes for November 2015, December 2015, and June of 2016, and we still have some more to go in there, but those are the three we have. In regards to the June 23rd minutes, I don't know if everybody saw the email that Jack Boyle sent around. If you haven't seen it, it is attached to the packet to the June 23rd, 2016 meeting minutes that you should have had in front of you, that it's on the very back. Does everybody know what I'm talking about? Okay. I went back and watched that portion of the meeting, and the 3 changes that Jack indicated in his email. The page 3, line 36 change is accurate to what was happening at the meeting. The page 3, line 41 was not the answer that was given. And I've talked to Joe about this. What I'd like to do is enter the replacement text into the today's meeting minutes as an addendum or a further explanation of the question that was asked, if that makes sense to people. So we're not going to change the June 23rd minutes. We're going to put this in as an added answer to the question that was asked on June 23rd, if that explanation makes sense. Also, the 3rd bullet point that Jack mentioned was page 8, line 6, the name of the water management consultant. We did not have the name of the water management consultant on June 23rd. So again, what I'd like to do is add the water management consultant to the to today's September meeting minutes, if that makes sense. I don't want to say something that was in the minutes that wasn't. And that seems to be okay, I think, with the Entergy people. So I don't know if anybody wants to. Well, Chris is all into it. I don't know. How do people feel? Do we want to do them? Is everyone okay with having one motion to accept the minutes for June 23rd, 2016, December 10th, 2015, and November 12th, 2015 with? Okay. So we want to do them separately? Okay. 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 We can do that. With, and I'm going to, if everybody's okay, I won't read what Jack wants in the record unless somebody wants me to read it. Okay, but I will add that to the current meeting minutes. So does anyone want to make, I've made a motion, does anyone want to?
Second.
Okay, Chris Campney is seconding the motion. All those in favor of adopting or approving the minutes of June 23rd, 2016, December 10th, 2015, and November 12th, 2015, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody not in favor of that? And one abstention? Anyone abstaining? Okay.
I'm abstaining, please, Kate. Lucy.
Yep, thank you, Lucy. So Lucy's going to abstain from all 3. Mike McKenney is going to abstain from all 3, and we'll have Jim Matteau June 23rd. And we're going to have more minutes at the October meeting, and hopefully our giant meeting minute nightmare will soon be over. Joe, Joe, you going to give the presentation on behalf of Entergy? And I'm just going to make one note to the agenda. We are going to have a 5-minute break, just so everybody can walk around. And that was, I want to give Joe credit for that, and it was a very good suggestion.
All right, thank you, Kate. I'll give you an overview of what's been going on at Vermont Yankees decommissioning project since we last met in June. First, as far as our decommissioning activities, we've been statusing the fact that we've been draining and laying up the systems that formerly were in operation at the site. We had a goal of completing that work at the end of June. We did meet that goal on schedule and on budget. One of the last systems that we did take out of service was our radioactive waste processing system. For obvious reasons, we were using that system in part to process water at the site for storage in the Taurus. So that major scope was done. And then we continue to go through the buildings that are no longer needed long-term. We've been consolidating our staffing and use of those buildings so that we can remove services and power. The obvious reason is to minimize the cost impacts on the project as we head into the next winter season here in Vermont. As far as NRC inspection activities, the NRC was on site most recently the week of August 29th. Their scope is always informed by their new program that oversees the decommissioning of any of the power plants. This particular inspection including looks at radioactive waste handling, how we handle and store waste and manifest them within the site, as well as spent fuel pool safety. These are all driven by NRC procedures. At the end of that inspection, there were no issues or potential violations identified. As far as state agency interactions, aside from the day-to-day work that we interface with the various agencies in the course of doing business on site, pleased to inform everybody that we did work with the Vermont Division of Emergency Management and Homeland Security to enter into a 2-year budget agreement that provides $300,000 per year to that agency for EP funding. That'll take them through fiscal 2017 and 2018, and I'm sure you'll be hearing more from that agency with their presentation a little bit later in the agenda. And then some of the things that you might have been reading about in the paper as far as us departing or with some of our excess assets, 2 things are happening. One, we have a set of properties in Brattleboro, Vermont. One is a former office building in our Joint Information Center. Right across the parking lot was our training center. And then adjacent to both of those properties, there is a piece of land that's used as a parking lot. All 3 of those are now listed for sale in the area by a Burlington-based commercial real estate agency. So we did get a little bit of press coverage on that, and we'll look forward to hopefully removing those properties as assets that we no longer need. In addition to that, we have quite an inventory of excess equipment, mostly industrial type equipment. We're going to be having an auction run by a professional auction agency on September 28th and 29th. I think it's partially online and partially you can be there in person. So we'll hopefully be, again, departing with inventory of equipment that is no longer needed at the site. One of the major project that we're working on at the site is the construction of the second dry cast fuel storage pad. As you all recall, and we reported at the June meeting, we did receive from the Vermont Public Service Board the Certificate of Public Good and Order, allowing us to construct the second ISFC pad. There's some related infrastructure along with that, and a new security diesel generator. A short time after, in early July, we began construction on that work. The work currently is on schedule and on budget. And in September, we went through the process of installing the new 200 kilowatt security diesel generator, replacing the existing security diesel generator. Right now, we're in the process of connecting all of the new cables, terminating them, and getting that new diesel generator ready to be operable in October. And that was one of the first steps in going forward with the new dry cast fuel storage facility. Holtec is our cask vendor. Of course, there was a presentation made to this panel last year talking about their system. We have completed the factory inspections and the plan that they have for providing the casks. We are in the process right now of fabricating the cast systems. 12 of them have been complete. out of the 45 additional casks that we need to complete the transfer of fuel from wet to dry. Those cask systems will be delivered in the fourth quarter of this year, and we're getting a firm delivery date. And the goal all along is to make sure that we transfer all of the spent nuclear fuel from the fuel pool to the dry casks no later than the end of 2020. The next slide shows a couple of photographs of the work that's going on, primarily focused on the new 200 kD diesel generator. Photo on the left is showing some form work for the pad that was constructed, and then the photo on the right shows the placement of the diesel that comes with its own enclosure, and within there the electrical infrastructure that's needed. So some major activities and major milestones achieved with the placement of that new diesel generator. As always, we give you an update on the Nuclear Decommissioning Trust. The Nuclear Decommissioning Trust Fund was at $586 million at the end of July. It's currently at $581.1 million at the end of August. The difference is a combination of withdrawals, qualified withdrawals from the fund, in addition to positive market performance. So we continue to be on track or ahead of our projections relative to use of the trust. The second trust fund balance that we've been reporting on is what is known as a Site Restoration Trust. This is part of the $25 million that Entergy agreed to pay as part of the 2013 settlement agreement. The current balance of that particular trust is $17 million. We've contributed 15 thus far to that, and that stayed pretty stable from the report at the end of July. And just to remind everybody, the next payment of $5 million into the Site Restoration Trust is scheduled by the end of this year. As far as our commitment to providing information, of course, we continue to participate in the NDCAP. We are doing speaking engagements as requested, or looking for opportunities to get the information out there. And we continue really with our community involvement and our charitable giving, which is really a very positive thing given the fact that our staffing continues to be less and less, but our dedication to the area has not. We have been conducting infrequent tours to key stakeholders, primarily because there's a lot of work going on at the site right now with the construction of the second ISFSI. So we're very selective for safety reasons in not conducting too many tours on site. We have done quite a few in and around the site. And of course, we continue to post all information on our website, vydecommissioning.com. Talk just a little bit further about this community support that I mentioned in the previous slide. Since the last meeting in June, our employees continue to raise money for local charities. We're proud to say that we've raised $1,450 for Insight Photography here in Brattleboro, and $1,250 for Camp Kiwani in Greenfield. So thus far, through employee contributions, we've raised over $25,000 to date. And then in addition to the actual cash donations, we continue to donate resources, assets, things like furniture and supplies when we were emptying out some of our office buildings and continuing to kind of collapse the infrastructure at the site. So just a partial list here. You can look New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Vermont all have benefited from these donated furniture and supplies, including the town of Vernon and others. So we're happy to continue to do that as well. And I will turn it over to Tony prior to taking any questions.
Okay, I hope everyone can hear me. And hopefully someone can bring up my presentation. Terrific. Okay, I'm just going to do my presentation from over here simply because I'm also running the presentations to the folks who are online. For those of you who have frequented these meetings, my presentations typically started with a summary of the ongoing filings that the Public Service Department had with the NRC. We actually have some results on that. I do want to mention that we're still awaiting a decision from the NRC commissioners regarding our concerns on valid uses of the Decommissioning Trust Fund. However, the other two filings, next slide, please. The other two filings, namely our opposition to reducing the emergency planning zone and also our request to continue an emergency response data system feed, those are actually addressed now by the agreement that Vermont Yankee has reached with EMHS. So those will be discussed a little bit in detail later this evening. Also, with regards to construction of the dry cask storage pad, as Joe has already mentioned, the CPG was granted on June 17. There are certainly plenty of construction activities going on at the site. Being that I'm at the site most of my time, I get to see these every day. There are state agencies available to see, to really monitor what is going on. Besides Public Service Department, Agency of Natural Resources, Vermont Department of Health do have oversight of some of the activities, particularly the non-radiological cleanup. Next slide, please. And additionally, we do get a weekly summary from Joe regarding water management issues, and bi-weekly now, we do hold a teleconference with Joe and Vermont Yankee senior staff to discuss what's going on with the water management and also to discuss any other issues that may be coming up at the time. As an example, several months ago, there was some discussion about potential water discharges to the Connecticut River. With some further discussion with ANR, really through these meetings, the decision or the determination from ANR was that there would need to be a special permit for this. And so that resulted in Vermont Yankee postponing that effort for the time being. And next slide, please. We've had quite a few NRC interactions, and most of these are the NRC has sponsored a number of public meetings that are relevant to decommissioning or some of the activities related to decommissioning. So there are a number of meetings that I have connected in through webcast over the summer. In particular, in early July, there was a follow-up meeting that the NRC sponsored regarding its decommissioning planning rules. This was actually an effort that started somewhere around 2010 or 2011, if I remember correctly. This particular meeting was a follow-up item really to discuss whether there should be rules for immediate cleanup of some types of radiological contamination. So Public Services Department, namely me and Bill Irwin, who is not here this evening, did participate in this meeting. Subsequently, both he and I, as well as Agency of Natural Resources, did provide written comments to the NRC. There was also, if you recall at the last meeting, I had mentioned that there was a Fukushima lessons learned meeting that I was very interested in simply because they were going to discuss groundwater incursion treatment at Fukushima. The meeting was rescheduled to July 14th. It was a rather interesting meeting overall. And really what I heard there, besides the fact that Fukushima is dealing with a much greater quantity of groundwater incursion than what Vermont Yankee is dealing with. Essentially, Vermont Yankee is doing everything that Fukushima has done to address groundwater incursions, with the exception of incorporating a frozen soil barrier, which is a very expensive proposition and I do not believe is necessary here. Next slide, please. Also, as the NRC continues to reorganize itself through the Project AIM 2020 initiative, I do continue to monitor the public meetings, the commissioner briefings, and what have you related to this effort. One major item that has been decided in this process, one of the things that the NRC considered as part of its restructuring was to consolidate all of its reactor decommissioning technology and knowledge to NRC headquarters. Right now, it is distributed between NRC headquarters, the Region 1 office, and the Region 2 office. The decision was that there was no real benefit to consolidate to headquarters, so they're going to keep that more or less as is. Next slide. And also related to the NRC moving forward, the NRC is now accepting comments regarding its strategic plan for the years 2018 through 2022. And what the strategic plan is, this is how the NRC decides what they need to regulate, what subjects need to be added to their scope. Are there any subjects that can be eliminated because there's no need for regulation anymore? Are there improvements that they need to make to their current regulation? So there was an overall stakeholders meeting held in late July, July 27th. That was more or less an all-day meeting, and pretty much anyone from the public could speak at that. Subsequent to that, the NRC also hosted a government-to-government consultation for the benefit of state governments. That was held on August 23rd, and that was a meeting that I did participate in. Next slide, please. So what we requested there was, one, to assure that the decommissioning regulation improvements that are ongoing do continue. And one thing we also requested was that the NRC strive for a more rapid response to changing regulatory needs. Now, what we mean by that is right now the NRC is working on decommissioning rules. The earliest we're going to see those rules is really the beginning of 2020. And my emphasis there is that's really a long time. Is there some way that we can shorten that up and get a faster response? We also made the point of enhancement of decommissioning trust fund oversight and really how the projected growth of DTF is studied by the NRC. There's been a lot of concern in this area, particularly from the Attorney General's office, and there have been some independent organizations that have raised these concerns. Even the NRC's own Office of Inspector General had raised concerns about this in 2015, and I pointed out that we would like to see this to continue. And also, we requested that there be an improved interface between other federal agencies in dealing with reactor regulation. This is something that I've heard at a number of meetings, that sometimes, when a question is raised from a state government, they're not certain, do we need to talk to the NRC? Do we talk to the EPA? Do we talk to the Department of Energy? So anything that can be done to clarify that is certainly helpful. One thing of note, some of the other states on the call, in particular Connecticut, they had raised concerns that state governments and local governments do not have the same access that the NRC provides to its licensees with regard to processes. The licensees have the Nuclear Energy Institute, which is a lobbying organization. The states would like to have better access, one, so we're consulted more, and two, we have a better idea of what's going on. Next slide. There was also very recently a meeting regarding the NRC's backfit rule. We did provide some comments on that. Backfit is the process that the NRC uses to assess whether an issue that has been identified at a particular site needs to become, whether those questions that resulted in that issue, do they need to be asked at other sites, or does it need to be a national issue, or even in some cases an international issue? So we did provide some verbal comments there. I intend to follow up with some written comments, but it is what it is. Next slide. And just yesterday, the NRC did host a meeting on its efforts to really understand what's going on with high burnup fuel. So there was a very brief summary on what has been done to investigate fuel cladding and hydride reorientation issues that can occur in high burnup fuel. Really what the presentation was about was the NRC was alerting us that in the very near future, within the next several weeks, there will be a report coming out that will discuss a number of high burnup fuel phenomena that the NRC and the Department of Energy have been jointly investigating. So there will be more on that. Then the last item regarding NRC interactions. Currently, the NRC has a public comment period open for its public meeting process. So the major item on this process is they would like to redefine their categories of public meetings so it's a little more clear what the meetings are supposed to do. So they propose three types of public meetings: an observational meeting, which is if there's a proceeding where a licensee or a reactor vendor or really anyone involved in the industry is giving a presentation to the NRC. The public is invited to observe that so they can see what's going on effectively. The two other options, which I think are more important, the informational meeting, which would be a presentation from the NRC or another party on a particular subject with an opportunity for questions and answers from the public. And the last item is a comment gathering meeting, and this would be effectively a short presentation with the bulk of the meeting focused on opportunity for public comments on the subject. This has been posted to the Federal Register. If people would like to see the notice or see the documentation regarding this, contact me and I can forward it to you. The comment period is open through November 14th. Okay, so we now turn, and just a reminder, if you do want to find out more about NRC public meetings, the NRC does have a public meeting website. Here it is. It changes almost daily, so I find myself checking this website 2-3 times a week now just to see what the NRC has coming up. Turning to Department of Energy interactions, I do work with the National Transportation Stakeholders Forum and the Council of State Governments on the CSG's High-Level Rad Waste Transportation Task Force. With these duties, I am working with the Ad Hoc Rail Routing Working Group, which is in the process of developing rail specifications, safety specifications, and routing selection specifications for the eventual transportation of commercial radioactive waste to a yet-to-be-named national repository. We are in the process of updating what the Federal Railroad Administration calls a Safety Compliance Oversight Plan, and this particular oversight plan is for shipment of commercial spent nuclear fuel. The oversight plan that we're working on was originally developed for transporting research reactor fuel from foreign sources. So it's a similar idea. It's a good starting point. We hope to have something really ready by the end of this year that we can get to a larger audience. Next slide. And related to that, just one more item, the NRC and the U.S. Department of Transportation have a comment period out on their radioactive material transport standards. There is an international standard that is being considered. It is being considered for addition to federal code, and the NRC and the DOT will also be providing feedback to the international standard, to the IAEA. So public comments on that will be accepted through October 28th, and the NRC and DOT will feed back the comments they receive and their own concerns to the IAEA on the international standard. Next slide. Okay, and consent-based siting. This is something that we've talked about in previous meetings. Over the summer, the DOE had a number of public meetings on what is necessary to develop a process for selecting a national repository for high-level waste and spent nuclear fuel. The Department of Energy has issued a draft of its summary of public input report. Namely, this is everything that they heard at these public meetings and also with industry meetings, conferences, and approximately 10,000 written comments that were sent to the DOE on this subject. Currently, the draft report is open for commentary. You can review it if you submitted comments and you don't think the DOE really expressed your opinion properly, you can let them know that. It is expected that the final report on this effort will come out at the end of this year, sometime in December. With that, there should be a first draft of a consent-based siting process. Moving forward, the DOE hopes that they will have funding to engage communities, that if someone is interested in accepting high-level waste, that there would be funding available for these communities to do research on what that really means. Next slide. Okay, so if you need to find out more about the consent-based siting process, okay, and Marty, if you can forward the slide, please. Thank you. There's quite a bit of information available at the consent-based siting website, and so here's the information on that. Also, the original comments are available, so there is a second website for that. My comments made it there. I know Kate filed some comments as well, and her comments are there as well. Next slide. And just a reminder regarding NDCAP meetings. All of the information presented in these meetings and our meeting minutes, annual reports, so on and so forth, are available at the NDCAP webpage, which is part of the Public Service Department website. If you have questions on what is done here, you can direct them to the panel through the psd.ndcap@vermont.gov website, or you can contact the Public Service Department's Consumer Affairs Division, or you can contact me directly, and my contact information is all over the place on this website now. Okay, and that is it for my presentation, so if there are any questions for me or for Joe.
Yeah, does anyone in the panel have any questions for either Joe or Tony, Stephen, or Steve? If you can try to talk into the microphone, because we want the people in TV to hear us.
How's that? Is that
perfect?
Legible? Tony, you mentioned a couple of things that I hadn't heard before, at least in very great detail. Cladding creep and hydride reorientation. Is that something, that's not something that we're concerned about with the VY fuel, or it is?
Well, those are phenomenon that are of concern really to any nuclear fuel in a core. That as the fuel is burned, there is a risk that the pellets themselves change shape.
Yes,
and as they change
understand
shape,
that,
the cladding on the outside, it's possible for the pellets to swell to the point that now, they're touching the cladding and they start to put stress on the cladding.
Right.
So that's where you get the phenomenon of cladding creep, because creep can result in, stress or failure of the cladding. With high burn-up fuel, being that, by definition, the fuel has been in, an active reactor core for a long period of time, there is a greater risk of some impact from cladding creep on the fuel. So I'm sure that the report that the NRC is about to release will have more information on that. The hydriding, realize that the metal that is typically used for cladding is a zirconium type metal. As it is subjected to radiation and also in a water environment, there is potential concern that we get hydrogen and oxygen production within an active core, and with that there's a chance that the hydrogen can, one, suddenly show up inside the fuel cladding, and two, move around a little bit and potentially change some of the material the material properties of the cladding. If you change the material properties, suddenly you have to stop and rethink, okay, is the cladding strong enough to, say, support being transported? Things like that. So
I see. So this has to do with movement of the fuel after it's cooled off, and
yes,
and it's been sitting there for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years anyway.
Yes.
It wouldn't be a phenomenon that would be identified during operation?
Yes, it would. There would be some indications of it during operation, is my understanding. This is one that I'm not as familiar with as, say, cladding.
I was trying to look at it from the perspective of the Vernon inventory and what we might be concerned about there.
Okay.
But pretty much we should have certainly had some identification of any failure mechanisms there prior to the reactor being shut down, I would think.
Correct, yes.
All right, thank you, that's all I had.
David?
On the same topic,
David?
what is
David,
high,
will you try to use the microphone?
what does high burnup fuel mean? Is there low burnup fuel?
Yes.
You know,
Okay, realize,
how does this
yeah.
hook
Okay.
to Yankee?
Okay, well, high burnup fuel, realize that when a reactor is operating, it's using fuel. When you refuel a reactor, you don't put an entire brand new core in. There's the idea of fuel management that, it's kind of like working a campfire. Initially you have, maybe 3-4 logs that you get burning. And then, as your fire starts to die down, you need to put a little bit of fresh fuel in. But you still have some energy from, the logs that are already there. This is really a good analogy for fuel management as well. The fuel was actually used for several operating cycles. Vermont Yankee typically used an 18-month fuel cycle between reloads. So some of the fuel that was operating in one core was then, maybe shuffled around in the core, but it was kept there for 2 cycles or 3 cycles. Well, that fuel burns up more. In other words, we use more atoms that was inside that fuel. So the NRC has determined that there's a point where the overall structure of the fuel starts to undergo a significant change, and that's what they determined to be high burnup fuel. So the burnup fuel is typically something, typically something that was used for about 3 cycles. so roughly 5 to 6 years. There will be some high burn-up fuel coming out of Vermont Yankee, but just the fact that it was using 18-month fuel cycles, the number of high burn-up fuel assemblies will be considerably lower than some other plants which operate 2-year cycles.
Thank you. Joe, if I could, you said that you've listed properties for sale, and I'm aware that you have property, Entergy has property on Ferry Road and at the plant site itself. What property have you listed? Ferry Road, plant site, and if it is the plant site, are people going to have to take apart what's there and move it off the campus, or?
No, these are all the Brattleboro properties, so these are the ones on Old Ferry Road. So these are the 3 off-site facilities that are all very adjacent to each other. There is no current plans to sell any of the properties around Governor Hunt Road or the site proper itself. So these are just specifically our old corporate offices on Old Ferry Road or training center.
Thanks. One more. Tony, your explanation on frozen soils, you said it's expensive and not necessary here, and my question is, why isn't it necessary here? Just by way of quick explanation in terms of how you reached that recommendation.
Well, the short answers here, number one, Entergy has been able to reduce the incursion rate, and there are efforts going now to really significantly reduce this. In the Fukushima instance, they're still looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 to 10,000 gallons per day of water seeping onto the site and passing through their turbine building, their reactor building, through cracks in the building, and that because the buildings have cooled down very much like what has occurred at Vermont Yankee. The frozen soil effort is literally they are setting up a ring of refrigerator coils into the ground that they're building an ice wall, and that's it's really because they have so much water to deal with there. Entergy has had some success so far in reducing its water incursions, and a few more months we'll know whether the current efforts have been successful.
Okay, and my last question is for you also, Tony. Your slide in terms of where publications and opinions and meeting minutes, et cetera, are on the web. Are the filed comments that the chair has submitted and Chris submitted, are they on that site also? I mean, is it?
You mean the Public Service Department website?
Yes.
At this point, no, but if I don't know if you want me to, I can get those up there.
Yep.
I would think that would increase transparency, and the public would know what we're saying on their behalf.
Yep, that's very simple.
Okay.
Thank you.
We can make that happen.
Hey, Tony, recognizing that it's incumbent upon us to try to track everything the NRC and DOE is doing, would it be possible, like as you notice things that maybe the public might want to comment on, to send us an email, or I don't know, just some way to kind of give us a heads up that you've noticed, hey, there's this thing that I'm interested in and you guys might be interested in it too. Would that be possible? Not putting the whole burden on you to be responsible for letting us know everything in the world that we might be interested in, but I mean, but just when you've cued into something, especially when it comes to like public engagement processes, public comment processes, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I've actually started that Kate had asked a similar question this summer, so the past several upcoming meetings I've given Kate a heads up on. It's really just a question, does everyone on the panel want to receive these emails? And I can certainly do that.
Sure, I have.
Okay, okay. We can do that.
Tony, I just wanted, in the Fukushima lessons learned,
Okay.
in that thing you saw, I was curious, did they talk about if the ice wall is working or not? And I've heard it's not working well.
You know, I offhand, I don't remember. I was, the discussion that was given was really more what the ice wall was. I would have to go back and check to see, what the overall opinion was right now. Was it working? Was it not working? But I can get an answer to that
Okay.
probably within the next week.
Thanks. I have a question for Joe. On the decommissioning trust fund, before work began and funds began to be drawn, we would get monthly, from the department, we would get a monthly statement of what was in the fund, and watching that, we would see how the fund was performing. Now, we get notified when Entergy informs the NRC that it intends to take out up to a certain amount, as I recall, whatever that amount is at a point in time. But we never know what's taken out. So as you note in your slide, the difference is due to qualified withdrawals and investment performance. Other than Entergy would rather not tell us, which I would fully understand, except this isn't Entergy's money. So I would question why can't we know how much is being withdrawn so that we also know how the fund is performing? They seem to be both important.
I think our plans are, on an annual basis, we'll give a more detailed breakdown of the fund performance, because those numbers then would be essentially audited, so we'd be able to tell you how much specifically we took out, how much we gained or lost through the investments, and then, how that resulted. Doing it on a monthly basis, the information I get is really just the balances at the end of each month, and we provide that same information to the state. And I think Kate put out a couple of summaries, monthly, but to get the detailed breakdown, that's not something that I get on a regular basis, but I think on an annual basis, I think last year, at beginning of the year, we gave kind of a summary of the year's performance, and that would be the appropriate time to give you more granularity on that.
Well, I might be wrong. I don't recall a statement for a given year or any given time when X dollars was withdrawn and used. I've seen summaries of how the fund, what the balances are. And I don't want to draw parallels about needing to wait for audits to release information, but I don't know why Entergy can't tell us how much they've withdrawn. They can tell you, tell everybody how much is withdrawn. Is there a legal reason why they don't do that? I would understand if it was Entergy taking money from its coffers and its shareholders to spend on its projects, that would be proprietary. But this seems very different to me.
Why don't I take a follow-up and see what I can do? I don't know whether it's proprietary. The information that I've been asked to present, through the panel up to this point is really just, the fund performance. And I try to give a little bit of information if that particular period of time there were market gains or losses, but I don't have the specific numbers. So let me look into that and see if I can give you a little bit more.
Well, yeah, I mean,
information.
we all appreciate the information we've been getting, but yeah, it would be interesting if we could find out either what has been and is being withdrawn, and if we can't find that out, why not?
Okay.
I would like to know that.
Very good.
I guess this is for George. The conversation about site restoration standards, now that Trey's Secretary of Administration.
Oh, wait, you, keep going.
If somebody has an answer to this, that would be great. When's it going to start? How's the public going to be engaged?
Well, you can answer part and then I'll answer part.
So the question was, when is he going to start as Secretary of Administration? I'm sorry.
No, the site restoration standards discussion, under docket 7862, that the anticipation was that there would actually be a proposal before the Public Service Board, I think before December 2015. So where are we now as far as conversations about the site restoration standards and what's going to be the public engagement strategy to be part of that discussion?
Okay. The answer to that is I don't know at this point. Certainly, conversations are ongoing, and I'm not actually privy to that right now. So, because I just found out about Trey leaving, so but I will follow up on that. Thanks.
And you knew, Kate?
Well, no, we're gonna, no, I don't know. We're gonna talk at the end of the meeting about future meetings. And what we're planning, we'll go into this more detail at the end, but what we're planning is in October to, the Mass DEP people have actually committed to coming up in October, so they can tell us what went on in Roe. And then the plan is to have another conversation about site restoration in November that's more specific to Vermont. What that conversation will look like right now, I don't know, but we've sort of, this was, Trey and I and Joe have sort of talked about how to have these conversations. So there will be some kind of conversation here, and it probably will evolve. So I can't tell you what we're going to talk about in November. I have a better idea what we're going to talk about in October.
So just for, I guess, so people understand what the hell I'm talking about. So that's awesome. I mean, that's great. It's a long time coming. That's great. And hopefully that'll inform any discussions the state has and any negotiations the state's having with Entergy. But ultimately, it's got to go before the Public Service Board. And that's what I'm trying to, if you guys have any insight about, is the state going to go on its own? Is Entergy going to file something? You know, because there's a regulatory piece to this. And the town, the region, others will likely be parties to that yet again. And I'm just trying to get a handle on when that might happen. So yes, if you could dig into that, that'd be awesome. Thanks.
Anybody else have any questions? Now, Tony, can I make one request? You were talking about the state making comments on these, during these public meetings.
Yeah.
If there's anything in writing, if you could share that with us as well.
Okay.
When you do a written comment, because I don't think any of us see those written comments if the state doesn't. I think that would be helpful.
Okay. That's actually something with the website. We do have a section that is kind of neglected right now, but okay. It's the reports section of the okay. website, okay. And I would like to get some of the really all of these submittals okay. onto that site as well, as well as things like the more recent NRC inspection reports, which come out quarterly.
Yep. Okay. Oh.
Do you have any, Tony? Do you have any support? I mean, do you have folk who can do that for you, or is there somebody else at PSD who can help you with?
A little bit. It's actually one of the few things I get to delegate here, but unfortunately, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but it is one of these things that, when I delegate, I say, okay, this is what I need, this is where it needs to go, and frequently I find that it means that I wind up calling up the person saying, okay, go on the page, okay, yeah, okay, do you see where I'm pointing right now? Yeah, okay, that's where it needs to go. So we're trying to work that out.
Okay, thank you. Now we have Mike McKenney from Entergy, who's going to give us an update on the water management issues at the plant.
All right, good evening. As we've done in the last several meetings, we provide updates on where we are with water management. And, the water management program, we anticipated some groundwater intrusion as part of our decommission plan, but not in the volumes that we've been experiencing since we shut down. So the way we've addressed this is to look at the most effective and cost-efficient water management approach that we can actually come up with, and it's been a strong focus for us. So we put together a comprehensive plan that's really had two major parts to it. One, to remove the storage of water that's come onto the site, and the second part of that has been to significantly reduce the in-leakage, and we've had some good success to date. We still have, you know, much more in-leakage than desirable, and I'll step through what we're doing about it. So as far as the water management team, we've had a number of industry experts helping us out with this. We've had hydrogeologists that are familiar with our site that have worked with us over the years. Several different consultants that have background in decommissioning as well as water management. And, you know, the panel heard a presentation by Energy Solutions earlier this year. They've been assisting us with the actual removal and disposal of the intrusion water. And then we have VY site leadership that has this as a high priority and have involved various subject matter experts. So collectively, we've worked to come up with you know, approach to this and are implementing solutions you know, to continue to reduce the intrusion water and also to be able to efficiently store it on site. Okay. As far as the options to minimize the intrusion water, we've to date you know, sealed some various areas around floor sumps and in the buildings themselves. We currently have an effort ongoing that I'll speak to in a minute. We also have looked at evaluating installing intercept wells inside our turbine building, which would allow us to redirect the groundwater. And then, you know, as I mentioned, we have shipped water to reduce the amount that we have actually on site in storage. So as far as the program itself, all the temporary storage pools have been drained and removed. We've reduced the frac tanks that we have on site down to just one frac tank that we use, and that's outside of our turbine building. And we've been shipping groundwater throughout the summer to Energy Solutions in Tennessee. And we started our effort to reduce our backlog, if you will, in storage back in February. And we finished that effort at the end of August. So now it's keeping up with you know, the intrusion water, and is currently, we're shipping one shipment a week, and on some weeks we may have to double up to stay underneath the one frac tank inventory, but that's our plan currently. Major effort we have going on right now is reducing in leakage in an area that we found that using some consultants that we feel will provide us some pretty significant reduction. And that's in an area that's between the reactor building and turbine building, an area that's called the seismic gap. And that work started earlier this week. It's intended to and projected to be approximately 5 weeks. But essentially what we'll do is restore the water stop in between those buildings, and we anticipate that's going to have a significant reduction in leakage. And then based on the results of that, we'll determine what our next steps are and what our options are. As mentioned, Energy Solutions has been providing the shipment and disposal services for the water. And we are working on another option also, so that we have another vendor available for disposal if needed, and they are located in Idaho. So in closing, security, health, and safety of the public and our employees are paramount. We want to be good, strong financial stewards of our decommissioning funds, and, you know, a big part of reducing the cost is getting the in-leakage reduced, and we want to manage the rate of groundwater intrusion and the actual disposal process in the safest and regulatory compliant and economic method that you know, we can achieve. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Mike, does anyone have questions for Mike? Well,
Diane?
Thank you. I was just curious, I know in New Hampshire we have a terrible drought situation, and assuming that that's fairly widespread, do you have any indication how much of the reduction is related to drought conditions and lowering of water tables and aquifers, and how much is a result directly of the efforts that Vermont Yankee's doing?
In response to the drought aspect, you know, we feel it may have had a little bit of impact here over the summer, but the last in-leakage reduction efforts actually had been implemented prior to the summer. So, you know, what we've seen over the summer as far as variability hasn't been that much, so we can't really attribute a lot to the, you know, less than normal rain.
You said in your remarks that you anticipated intrusion of groundwater, and that my question is, did the intrusion of groundwater start at shutdown? And why would shutting down create a different situation than you faced previously? I mean, same structure, same walls, same aquifer, et cetera.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. We feel that we may have been getting some in-leakage when we were operating, but it would have been masked by our rad waste system, okay, because it would be processed, and it wouldn't, there's no way to separate that out. When we shut down, the buildings cool down, and that's a source of anything that, as it cools, like, you know, concrete, where you can have, you know, cracks, fissures open up as it cools down. So it's a combination of the two. We could have very well had some amount of in-leakage when we were operating, but it wasn't identified.
You just went ahead and processed it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
The other thing is feasibility of installing septic wells inside the turbine building to redirect groundwater away from the building. Now, I understand curtain drains in terms of keeping groundwater away from, say, a basement or whatever. Is that what you're talking about? Because I don't understand how you can redirect groundwater.
Yeah.
I mean, a curtain drain collects it and sends it someplace that is better than being in the basement.
No, I know what you mean. The way that we anticipate that these would work, and there's different ways to do it, but the primary objective would be to actually, you know, drill wells down through below the buildings into the water where, you know, it hasn't, you know, come up through the buildings and been contaminated yet, and redirect it, you know, for discharge.
So essentially, you'd be taking water directly out of the aquifer, running it through a pipe or whatever to somewhere else.
Right, and it's, you know, perfectly clean water that hasn't come into the building.
Right, okay, okay. Thank you.
Hi, Mike. Question, I know this was discussed in past meetings, so I'll apologize and admit that I still don't get it. But the disposal that's taking place in Tennessee and that's anticipated in Idaho, what exactly are they doing with it?
You know, I wasn't here at the last meeting, Jim, and I'm not, I think, prepared to provide an explanation of how their process is. I could take a follow-up and get some details on it.
Yeah, I would appreciate, I mean, a consultant was here at a previous meeting and addressed that, and it was one of those that as I'm driving out of the parking lot, I'm going, what was that? And I don't blame him for that, I blame me, but I would just like, and I think the public would probably like some clarification. If we're shipping it out, I think we should want to know what they're doing with it.
Yeah, I know it's a you know, a facility that's approved by the NRC, but as far as how the process works,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I have no doubt that they're all approved, but I just would like us to know what it is they're actually doing.
Jim, Mark Walker from Energy Solutions, who was the individual who gave the presentation, has offered to come back at a future meeting to give an update on the water that's been sent down, and I'm sure he'd be more than pleased to describe the process of how they actually dispose of the water. So we can take him up on that at any meeting in the future.
I'll leave that to the chair, but that would help. And if that were the route we go, I would want to know, is Idaho any different, and if so, how? Is that a different company in
Yes.
Idaho? Yeah, so, thanks.
Jim?
Mike, I'm assuming that these frac tanks are loaded on to trucks and then replaced with an empty one, or are they drained on site into something?
Are you the frac tanks that we've used, Jim, have just been for on-site storage?
Right.
For the actual shipping of water, you know, Entergy Solutions has actual tanker trucks that come.
So it's
And
offloaded from these?
So we pump from the frac tank over into the tanker truck.
Okay. What's the size of these frac tanks? What do they hold?
About 20,000 gallons.
Are they?
But those, again, the frac tanks stay on VY site. The trucks that ship back and forth are about 5,000 gallons.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? Okay.
Anyone else have a question? Oh,
I guess it's just a request, Mike, that I know that you guys didn't go forward with the permit for the release into the Connecticut, because it looks like you found some other solutions, which is great. But I guess what I would ask is, if you think that that's going to be a pathway that you want to explore again, that I guess you do so with plenty of time, as opposed to like, oh my gosh, we got a lot of, we're not in drought conditions anymore. We got more water coming. I don't know what would cause it necessarily, but that it just not be kind of a rush situation. So just a request. I'm not saying that y'all would do that, but just wanted to ask that if you think you're going to have to go that route, be proactive. But I know you also don't want to go through a permitting process, so you don't have to go through either. But anyway, just a request.
okay, guess there are no more questions for Mike. If everybody would like to, we're scheduled to take just a 5-minute break, and I know some people on the panel would like to. So what we'll do is take a little break, and at 7:20, we'll come back and we'll hear the presentation by Emergency Management. Okay, I think we're going to get started again. Okay, now I want to welcome Scott Carpenter and Glenn Herron from the Vermont Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. And if you want to tell us, before you give the official presentation, a little bit about what you do at Emergency Management, I think that would be interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, is it on? There we go. Thanks, Kate. My name is Scott Carpenter. I am the Planning Section Chief for the Division of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. Glenn Herron is one of our planners in our department. So we are responsible for the emergency planning, the state emergency operations plan, which is more all hazards encompassing how do we respond to floods, how do we respond to state hazards that impact the state. Our radiological emergency response plan is an aspect of that. We have two radiological plans. One is We call it Incident Annex 9, which is the state radiological plan, which it covers how the state responds to a radiological incident that might be say a dirty bomb or something like that that happens elsewhere. And we also have Annex 9A, which is the Vermont Yankee site-specific one. And that's what we're going to discuss today, because that plan has taken some significant changes since the shutdown. And I think we can head on to the next slide. I apologize for the typeset. It's a little bit smaller than we anticipated for, but hopefully everybody can see it, and it'll be posted later on too as well. So we'll go over the situation, and I will go over basically the knowns that we have at this point, where we currently stand, and then I'll turn it over to Glenn to kind of go over what we've done with our plan changes, and how the plan actually looks at this point, and what we'll look forward down the line for the future. And then we'll open it up for questions after that. And you can head right on. So these are, everybody knows these. I'm not rehashing anything that's not news to the folks that are in the room. I think the biggest things for us on this slide are the remaining release hazards. We're looking at, industrial accident or a hostile action-based incident that we are planning for. The emergency alert levels, of course, went down to unusual event and alert, and that all happened around April timeframe when the new E-plan went into effect and when the FEMA and the NRC rules went away. That also, a date in the middle of there that we didn't put in there was the downsizing of our radiological program in Brattleboro. We went from a staff level of, what do we have, 3, 4 folks, to now a staff of 1 person left in the Brattleboro office whose full-time job does not have to do a Vermont Yankee. So that happened the end of June, the end of our fiscal year. So we are now looking at how that impacts us and what that does for us long term. We can probably go on to the next. This here, and I am by no means a professional in this, so it is something that I'm coming into as well. So I will not try to speak to my authority on this at all. But I know that it's the EPA Protective Action Guides for Radiological Incidents, and the ones to look at are the 3rd and the 4th bullet. Really, it's less than 1 rem and more than 1 or equal to rem. And the 4th bullet is really where we come into play. It's going to trigger our state response mechanisms, and it's where we consider a state emergency. Where our response level will come into play. Other than that, it's more local based. It's where the EPZ falls down onto the site level. And I apologize for this, but hopefully everybody can parse through it a little bit. I'll try to read through it as much as humanly possible here. So our preparedness resources that we have, the top bullet is funding. Like Joe said before, emergency management was able to negotiate a $300,000 per fiscal year for the next 2 fiscal years with Entergy. The bullet underneath there, we have town funding agreements that are part of this, and they will be forthcoming. We're still developing a scope of work for the towns and what sort of funding that is going to be available to them under that agreement. It's going to be fairly similar to what we had before. It's probably not going to be the same level by any means, because $300,000 a year is not the level that we had either. But it is going to encompass training, exercise, equipment for the towns as well. Too fast. Second bullet, staff. Again, we maintain the responsibility for the emergency planning and response, and that's a statewide function of us. We will have 1 person coming on board in Brattleboro. We have 2 new positions that have been posted. One is a North Regional Planner and one is a South Regional Planner. Those positions are out and they are currently posted on our Human Resources website, but the Southern Regional Planner will have responsibilities to interact with Vermont Yankee long-term for planning and exercises. And then down to the equipment tab on the bottom, the dosimeters and survey meters have been consolidated at the state level. We're currently in talks with our partners at the Department of Health and the hazmat team to figure out how we're going to parse those meters out and how it's going to work on our end for a more holistic statewide radiological response plan, and where we end up pulling that together and making it so that across the state we make sure that we benefit from what we have in our capacity. With that, I will turn it over to Glenn to go over what we got for the plan changes.
Good evening. My name is Glenn Herron, Division of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. Thank you. So the first thing I'm going to do is real quick zip through what the plan changes are for those of you who have been used to what's been going on for the last however many years that we've had emergency plans in place. And then after that, I'll talk about what is the overall plan look like. So the big one, and this, again, I'm sorry, this is hard to read. The emergency planning zone, of course, shrank from the 6 towns around Vermont Yankee to the site boundary. That's the federal zone. So we still work with the 6 towns around Vermont Yankee for emergency preparedness, but they're not considered part of the emergency planning zone anymore. The most obvious thing that people will see from that is you won't get calendars anymore, you don't get tone alert radios or batteries anymore, that kind of stuff. But the state still works with the towns. The second thing, the reception center. We used to have a plan for a reception center for people that might have been contaminated. Now it takes so long for something to get released from Vermont Yankee that we don't have a standing reception center anymore. If there is an emergency at Vermont Yankee, we have plenty of time to evacuate people, send them to other congregate care facilities without needing a designated reception center. The next thing, radiological survey teams. Before, we had spaces and faces. We knew who would have to be, what kind of people we would need for a radiological survey team, and we had them assigned, and we had people trained up for them and said, you know, if something happens, you go here, you do this, you do this. What we have now, we still have those roles, but we don't necessarily assign and train people beforehand for that. So if we need them, we'll stand up the team, we'll train them up, and then we'll send them down to do that. For the state and EPZ drills, we used to do them monthly drills or monthly radio checks, quarterly drills. Now we're looking at biennial drills with the biennial planning exercises and biennial drills with the towns. Training used to be an initial and an annual requirement. Now we just offer it for the responders who need it. Equipment, Scott just touched on it. We used to have dosimetry and survey meters that were already sent out to the 6 towns and Rescue Inc. and the other first responders like the Brattleboro Fire Department. Now we have all that stuff consolidated so that if we need it, we will give it back out as needed, but it's consolidated down in this area so that we can use it instead of giving it to the towns to maintain. And the last part there is potassium iodide. It used to have potassium iodide pills that were given out to the general public in case of an emergency. With the reactor no longer operating and it has been shut down for so long, there is no longer a risk of a potassium iodide or of radioactive. There's no longer a risk of radioactive iodine being released, so you don't need the potassium iodide to protect yourself against it. So that program is, the Vermont Department of Health guidance is to, if you have potassium iodide, keep it just in case. But there's nothing that's going to happen at Vermont Yankee really that's going to lead us to say, hey, take your potassium iodide. So that's it for the big changes. So what does the current plan look like overall? Next slide, please. So from a preparedness standpoint, for planning, we revised all of the state plans, the 9 alpha that Scott just talked about. We revised that in the spring. The official version actually got signed and published in August, but in spring we had the state plan done, and all of the town plans were also revised in April. So if anybody here lives in one of the former emergency planning zone towns, you can go to your town emergency management director and say, hey, let me see the Vernon plan, and they have an updated plan that ties in with the state plan. For training, We still offer training. Nobody's asked for it lately, but we still have the same suite of training classes that we offered before, and those are available to any responders or select board members or other leaders that they want. And finally, for the exercises, I talked about that a little bit before, but we are still going to be doing planning exercises periodically and exercises between the state EOC and the towns, especially now that we have the money to do that. So that's a good thing. Next slide, please. If there's a response structure, the boxes in gray at the bottom are the local incident response. What's going to happen is if something bad happens at Vermont Yankee, the responders on site will start to deal with it first. They will set up an incident command site or incident command post that will handle it with the Yankee responders and the off-site responders from places like Brattleboro Fire, Vernon Fire Department, Mutual Aid. If it's a hostile action incident, then they'll get the Vermont State Police and Windham County Sheriff's Department. If necessary, we'll tie in with New Hampshire State Police and Mass State Police, et cetera. So it grows from there. So if it grows beyond the local incident, which is the gray boxes at the bottom, Vernon, the town, will have an incident command post to deal with what's going on in Vernon, like the school across the street. And the other towns in the area will also activate whatever they need to handle anything that's going on in Brattleboro or Guilford, or if it goes for a long time, out into Halifax, Marlborough, and Dummerston. Above the local incident response, you have the state level. The governor's up there at the top. The governor himself will be interested in what's going on, or herself, as it may be. But below that, we have the State Emergency Operations Center. That's what tracks what's going on, and we're the ones that coordinate between the Vermont Yankee Control Room and the town emergency operations centers or incident command posts. We also coordinate any of the Vermont support and any of the federal support that's going to go on, and if we need to, we would set up a staging area for evacuation support, things like that. So that's what the response structure looks like. Next slide. Finally, this is just an overall review of what the current plan calls for. If there's an unusual event, there is no real notification to the public, just so you know. An unusual event is something that's really small. It's typically over and done with. It's like a minor earthquake up in Montreal. It's unusual, but it doesn't have any safety impact. So I suppose Vermont Yankee might, or Entergy might release a press release on it or something, but pretty much by definition, it's not a big deal. So we don't make it a big deal. The alert level is where things start to get interesting. There's potential safety impacts. So once we get to alert, at Vernon, they would assemble school buses. They would consider transferring the kids, obviously if school is in session. Then they would consider moving the kids out of there. You also look at the governor declaring a state of emergency. If it seems like there's something significant, if there's like an attack on the plant, obviously the governor would declare, or would probably declare a state of emergency. And we might have the town of Vernon do a shelter in place. So for example, if there's any kind of attack on the plant that's more than just a guy with a pistol, then we might say, town of Vernon, shelter in place. Just, there may not be any radiological risk at all, but we want to make sure people are in their houses for whatever happens and to get them out of the way of any hostile action. We would, in this case, once we get to alert, we would be working with Entergy to issue press releases, and the state would issue a Vermont Alert notification, which I would urge you all to sign up for Vermont Alert if you have not already. But we would be sending phone and email, text, whatever messages out to people saying, here's what's going on, here's what we know, here's what you should be doing about it. So that's how we would notify the public of what's going on in the event of an alert. The last category is the escalation beyond alert. And that's what happens when we've gotten beyond what we think might happen. So ISIS has taken over the plant and has raised the flag and is there for 2 weeks. That's when we still have the plans to do all of the things that we used to do. So we could do evacuations. We would tell people to shelter livestock, clear parks, have other places shelter in place. If we were doing something like that, we would send out an emergency alert system message. So your tone alert radios would go off. If you turned to the radio, you'd hear instructions. We would again be sending out press releases and Vermont Alert messages. And if necessary, we would even have people out. We'd work with the locals to have people out knocking on doors and letting them know that, hey, there's something serious going on. But that's all Very unlikely. We have the plans for that. We know what we would do in case of it, but we're not expecting to have to practice that kind of stuff anymore. Yep. Next slide. That's all I have. I'll turn it back to Scott.
Does anyone on the panel have any questions? David?
Good evening, Scott. You indicated that there is radiological emergency response training available for state and local personnel, but that you haven't received any recent requests. When was the last time that there actually was a request for that?
I don't know. I don't know, Glenn, if you know.
I think the last request I got was like in February, and I set one up for March, and nobody came. The last one that we did was in, I want to say November, December. If you don't count the planned stuff that we do with town incident command post emergency operations center folks, which the last one of those we actually did was in April, reviewing the plan and talking about, okay, given the new plan, how does the response differ? We went through this in detail with the town so that they would know what to expect.
But as far as actual response training goes, it sounds like it's been over a year. Roughly, yeah. Okay. Also, you indicate that there's biennial workshops and biennial tabletop exercises. When are those scheduled next?
I don't think we have any currently planned. I think we were in discussions with Entergy today actually about trying to schedule those out. But at this point, we don't have them on the calendar yet.
Nothing scheduled at this time?
Nope.
Thank you.
You kind of just answered my question because it wasn't clear on here whether the plans and those exercises were actually involving energy, because you only mentioned the towns, but I'm assuming that they do involve energy.
Yeah, I mean we'll
the exercises
we'll play with Entergy and the towns as well. You know, whoever's is and we'll plug into any drills that they have as well. So we'll make sure that we're on tap. We understand what's going on. And we will, coming up, make sure that we have a joint planned exercise with everybody so that we're all on the same page.
Okay. Yeah.
Chris?
What's the, I guess, job description or scope of work for the 2 DMHS regional positions? Are they just limited to radiological?
No.
Okay.
They're north and south. They're planning positions more than anything. The south one is going to have a task under them that does have to do with radiological and Vermont Yankee, but that's about it. The north one doesn't have that.
This is made more for, I guess, more for VY, if maybe Mike knows the answer. Once the fuel's in the casks, does the fence line move in, or the exclusion area, does it move in at all from what it is currently, do you know?
We're looking at post fuel transfer security and any changes to the site, but I don't think we have that plan in place right now.
And do you know, once the fuel's in the casks, I know it's a pretty small site. Is it at all within the realm of possibility that the NRC would release any of the site for redevelopment?
The NRC does have a process called partial site release, but you would have to develop a license termination plan for that parcel. Then you would have to go through implementation of that plan, get NRC to confirm that you've done it properly, and then you would release that part of the property. You're right, for a site this small, that would be something that might be looked into, but some of the larger sites here in New England with hundreds and hundreds of acres, over 1,000 acres, that was implemented because, there was so much of the land that was so far away from the site. It was much easier to determine it was non-impacted and therefore could be released. So that process is available. We haven't gone that far at Vermont Yankee to see whether it's worthwhile.
And previously, was that the examples that you gave where you have the much larger sites? So I'm trying to remember, was that pre or post decommissioning?
I think most of the sites would be after decommissioning. You would
okay.
release the property. Yep.
There's a lot going on when you're doing a decommissioning, so it'd be tough potentially if you had other activities going on there, I would guess.
You write the license termination plan for the whole site, and then
Yeah.
you decide if you want to do some of it now and some of it later. So generally, you don't do too many of those because they're very involved and you need NRC approval and all that, so.
Okay. What I was trying to figure out was if you'd have to then plan for security with other activities going on the site if the fence line remained the current fence line and all that. Okay, thanks.
I have a question. When you say north and south, the south person is in Windham County, is the north person physically up north?
Physical location,
Yeah.
office location? Yeah, south person is going to be located here in Brattleboro in our office, and the north person is going to be out of Waterbury.
Okay, and the north person will be involved in if something like this happens, like the chain of command? I'm just trying to figure out, if the $300,000 just going to be spent in Windham County, or does it go to the emergency management general operating costs?
I believe it's partially funding at least 2 positions. I believe the southern person and probably part of our planning staff as well up in Waterbury, as well as dishing that out towards the towns and response organizations as well. So there's a bunch of parcels that are coming out of that $300,000.
Okay, and when the emergency planning zone went away, the notification times of emergencies was extended. Has anything changed with the notification times under the plan?
Look at your way, Glenn.
I don't remember the standards off the top of my head. Entergy has a little bit longer to notify the state if there's a problem. I think it's something like half an hour now instead of 15 minutes, or an hour instead of half an hour. But that's, from our perspective, that's okay, because it takes like 16 hours before anything bad could even begin to happen from a radiation at the fence line getting above, 1 rem total equivalent dose equivalent. For it to be an emergency at Vermont Yankee, from our perspective, it's going to take literally weeks of something happening and not being addressed. So the difference between 15 minutes or an hour is not significant from our part.
And just one more question. It's $300,000 a year, but you also mentioned bill back. Are you planning to bill back beyond the $300,000?
No, that's our agreement. It's $300,000 per year.
Okay.
We pull away from the bill back for us, for DMHS.
Okay. And no, it's just for emergency management and Homeland Security is the $300,000, and you won't bill back, but that doesn't preclude other departments or agencies in state government from billing back.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. Does anyone else on the panel have any questions? All right. Does anyone in the public have any questions about the emergency response plan? Yes, please. If you come up, and we'll have to share a mic. And if you can tell us who you are and where you're from so that we can get it in the minutes, it would be much appreciated.
Okay. So I'm Deb Katz. I'm with the Citizens Awareness Network. And presently I live between 2 high-level nuclear waste dumps. One 4.5 miles from my house and the other 16 miles. So what I'm wondering is, in terms of, you're talking about a terrorist attack, whether it was homegrown or Al-Qaeda, but there's also the potential for fuel fires and for a loss of water from the pool, and I'm wondering if there's any training that you've done in terms of that. There are DOE contractors who analyzed that a fuel fire, that as it burned up and the radiation was given off into the environment, that it could within 24 hours go 100 miles. So I'm wondering what kind of training you're getting in terms of evaluating that, and who's going to be in charge, whether hazmat's called in. I'm sure the NRC is, but even though it's true, it's going to take time for the fuel to burn and off gas. Once it starts burning, you can't get to it, and it could off gas for a long time. So I'm wondering what kind of training you're getting in terms of that.
Yeah, and that's very true. I mean, that's the absolute worst case scenario is just what you talked about, the fuel pool draining, the fuel cladding, catching fire. Right. Right. But Yes. So the Vermont Yankee essentially is the incident commander for response on their site, and they would get a lot of help from the Brattleboro Fire Department and the local fire guys, and they work with Vermont Yankee on how to respond to that, and they have plans for if the pool is leaking, how do you keep it from getting to that point. So all of our planning really, well, not all of our planning, but the majority of our planning is focused on how do you keep that from happening, because it takes a while. There's a lot of water. It takes a while for the water to leak out, a long time. When I say a while, I'm not talking like, how long it takes to run the water to make your water hot for a shower. It takes a long time for that water to drain or boil off or whatever bad is going to happen. And then even once that happens, it takes a long time for the fuel to get hot enough for there to be a fire. So anyway, so most of our planning and training is focused on how do you keep that from ever happening. And then if that ever did get to that point, that's why we have the escalation beyond alert procedures. So we would use that time.
Like they've done tabletop work in terms of laying out a scenario of an accident of one kind or another and what kind of responses are needed. It's a kind of training to see who did well, who didn't. So I'm wondering if there are any tabletop trainings that will go on around the loss of the spent fuel pool, so that in one sense people have a sense of what the escalation is, what's going on, not that anyone can know exactly, but so that the people who are, besides Entergy, have some sense of how this could escalate and how they have to be prepared to deal with it, because these are really chaotic situations at best.
So we, and at the state level, we focus on making sure the local responders are looking at that. I don't get into that detail.
But they're not going to want to get too close either at that point if you have a fuel problem. Well, I wouldn't want to get too close.
But that's again, that's why we focus so much on keeping it from ever getting there.
Glenn, wouldn't the past exercises that we've been doing with Vermont Yankee pretty much cover that? The only big difference is notification and warning. Some of that, the expediency of that has gone away with the sirens and so on, but the response and how it's taken care of is pretty much the same as what we've been drilling for all these years, wouldn't it be?
Right. It's actually a reduction in threats, because now we don't have to worry about the operating reactor anymore. We only have to worry about the spent fuel pool, and all of the other pieces are essentially, telling people to, notifying the public, telling them to evacuate or shelter in place. All of those things are the same things we've been practicing.
And the town plans would react about the same.
Yes, except for we have more time to decide and make sure that we're doing the right thing instead of knee-jerk reaction. Not that that's what we were doing before.
Thanks. I'm Leslie Sullivan Sachs. I live in Brattleboro. I'm with the Safe and Green campaign. So my first reaction is $300,000 doesn't get you very much. So this is for the next 2 years, 17 and 18, correct? They want to have all the fuel moved out of the pool into dry casks by 2020. Would this plan change at all while they are actually moving the spent fuel from the pool into the casks?
I believe, and it's part of our agreement, that we had the ability to renegotiate for the additional 2 years. I'm just looking at Joe to make sure, but I'm fairly certain that for the next 2 years past 18, we have the ability to renegotiate that agreement with Vermont Yankee, so we can hopefully push ours, if it goes to 2020, where the transfer of the fuel, we have that ability to go back to them and discuss again. Then it'll.
What if they would start moving the fuel before the end of this agreement time period comes up, or is that just not going to happen?
The funding is for the next 2 fiscal years, and it recognizes the schedule that we have for moving fuel from wet to dry. But it's correct that if we go beyond 2018, we would have the ability to re-enter into negotiations and with the department.
Okay. Reading my handwriting. I had to put my glasses on for that, so now I can't read this. And I really missed the handouts. That was helpful. Okay. Let's see. So if there isn't a standing reception center anymore, where would we go? I mean, we're like guinea pig. You know, we've been trained for the last 40 years. We know where those places are to go. What do we do now if there's, I don't understand that part. The standing reception center versus underwhelming.
So because it's very unlikely that there would be any leak, yeah, yes. So if it turns out that there is a leak, or there might be one that's bad enough to require evacuation, we would have time to designate something, which would, in all probability, be Bellows Falls Junior High School again. But we would have time to look around and say, oh, okay, crap, we need a place. Here's the place. We'd find the staff, and then we would put out directions for the reception center. Much more likely is we would be able to give the evacuation order beforehand, and we would have, the Red Cross has congregate care centers, they're called. So we would tell people, hey, if you're in Halifax or Marlborough, go to Wilmington. I'm just making these up, but go to Wilmington. If you're from Dummerston, Brattleboro, go up to the White River Junction, and there's a high school up there that we'd put people. So we would coordinate that ahead of time with the Red Cross for where to send people. The ideal is always that you go to just someplace, you know, a relative or another family member, someplace that you're going to be comfortable, so that you're not in a shelter. But we would set up shelters and tell people when the time came where to go, if that answers your question.
We're going to get a lot of information.
Yeah.
A lot.
Hey, Leslie, can I add one thing to that, maybe, or maybe just for, and Glenn, tell me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I think we're moving into a scenario where DMHS trains for like, prepares for like, if you have a train derailment and something really nasty dumps out, and it would be kind of morphing into that mode. So you would still have this, I mean, well, I'll let them answer that, but I thought that was kind of the scenario we're moving into, is we're moving into, there is a risk, but the risk is more, all hazards. Yeah, all hazards, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, in the planning world, you say plan early, plan twice, because you know, you put together a plan too early, and whatever happens is so different that you have to do the whole plan over again. You know, you were planning for something, you know, for everyone to go to Bellows Falls Junior High School, and the high school has a fire and you can't use it or something like that. So anything bad that's going to happen at Vermont Yankee now will take long enough that we will have time to look at the plans that we have and adjust them and assign the faces to the spaces that we know that we need to do whatever we need to do to keep the public safe.
Well, I know that the folks in the EPZ have been very well trained, and I hope none of them are retiring over the next, 5, 10, 15 years, because we're depending upon you guys. The last question I just had was about the radiation survey team. You said you would put one together and train people on the spot. Is that to check for radiation also in the air, or?
Yeah, excuse me, there's actually two. There's, and I'm completely blanking on the formal titles. There's one, a plume tracking team. If there's an airborne contaminant, there's a plume tracking team that goes out and checks the air for where there might be contaminants in the air. And there's a dose assessment team that goes out after the plume is passed or when it's safe and checks the ground to find out what contaminants are left on the ground.
Guy Page. I'm curious with the whole evacuation thing. You mentioned there's going to be it'll be a relatively slow developing event. Will there be education ahead of time that says, look, if anything really bad ever happens with the pool there, we can tell you right now it's going to be a slow developing event. So the reason I'm asking that is I know in Fukushima, my understanding was that the human harm, you might say, was due to what happened during the evacuation, because understandably, and a lot of people were hurt and I think even killed in the human stampede, you might say. So I just wonder if there's going to be some education ahead of time that might prevent that sort of jump in the car and drive over the dog on the way out of the driveway kind of mentality.
I think that's an excellent question. As far as I know, we haven't really, other than us like talking to the town emergency management folks and appearing in forums like this, I don't think we've really publicized that a whole lot. But I think it's worth considering on our part.
That type of issue could happen regardless of what the incident is. You know, if people are trying to get out of town for a flood or a flash flood or anything like that, it's the same type of scenario. People are trying to evacuate. I think it's almost it's something to discuss with towns and see who understands and who knows and what their public outreach mechanisms are.
After that, very mundane question. Kate, you mentioned the bill backs, and I understand your department won't be doing any bill backs. I get that. Can other state departments, will they be allowed to pursue bill backs in connection with VY emergency management? They will. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else from the public?
I would just say, please don't run over your dog if you're evacuating.
A couple questions. First one's for you guys. When Vermont Yankee started up, we built a whole bunch of sirens all over the area. I realized that they offered them to the communities and abandoned them. What's the status of those right now? Are they just allowing to deteriorate, or are they being maintained?
I believe Vernon was the only town that took over them. So Vernon still has the sirens. The other 5 towns all turned them over, and Entergy didn't leave them in place. They collected them up and did something with them.
And my next question is for Entergy. Do you by chance know the actual numbers of the activity levels and the isotopes in the wastewater that you're getting out of the ground?
Are you referring to the water that's been shipped as part of the water management system?
Yeah, the groundwater intrusion. What's the isotopes that are being found in it and the activity levels?
I don't have that information. We do sample all of those before they're shipped, but I don't have that information readily available.
Oh. Yeah.
You know, I can look into that, but I can tell you that the levels are so low that the trucks are not placarded as radioactive material with the Department of Transportation. So if that gives you a feeling of comfort, that's how low they are, but I can look into whether that information's available. I believe we provide it to the state.
Yeah. And that's probably something, Joe, we might be able to get that information when we do the water management with Energy Solutions people.
Sure.
Would that be the right time to get that information?
Yeah. Yeah, that would be, if we're going to have a follow-up on understanding where the water gets disposed and how, that would be the appropriate time.
Okay. And I have one question. There are no sirens anymore, and there's no radios anymore. So the best thing for people to do is sign up for VT Alert. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say so. That's going to be our all hazards notification system. It's probably the best.
Yeah. And it's not just for emergencies at Entergy. They should sign up in general. And where do they go to sign up? We'll do an advertisement right now.
That's perfect. Glenn is one of our trainers, so I'm going to let him do our plug.
I'm also one of the 3 VT Alert administrators. It's vtalert.gov. Don't misspell that as VI Alert, because that'll get you the Virgin Island alerts, and then you'll get a lot of warnings that, oh, warm sunny day on the beach. So if you go to vtalert.gov, that will let you sign up for an account where you can control what kind of alerts you sign up for, and that gives us, it gives us our contact information, so you tell us if you want to be notified by email or pager or text or phone. We can use the system anyway to get landlines, because we know Fairpoint gives us all the landline locations. So if there's an emergency at Vermont Yankee, for example, we will call everybody within 2 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles, whatever the risk area is, and we will tell you what's happening, tell you what to do about it. And we can do that anyway, but we encourage people to sign up at vtalert.gov because then you can give us your mobile phone number and you can tell us if you want an email and stuff like that. We don't have your email addresses unless you give them to us.
And
that is an all hazards tool. It's not just Vermont Yankee, and it works all the way all across Vermont. And you can sign up for multiple locations. So if you're, if you have if you live in Brattleboro but you have a parent in Randolph, you can sign up for both locations, and that way you can find out if there's something going on there that you need to tell mom about, for example.
I'm going to put in a pitch for something else, which is that we're talking about all hazards planning. After you get past the household level, it's the town level where emergency response occurs. If you have an interest in zirconium fires and that kind of thing, I know the risks are relatively low. The risks of floods and windstorms and lots of other things are an absolute certainty. So get involved with I would encourage you to get involved with your town's emergency management preparedness. They develop local emergency operations plans every year. I'm sure your emergency management director would love some assistance. Get engaged more broadly, because I can guarantee you there are other things that we've got to respond to.
I'd just like to add a little bit of clarity here. I've heard the comment a couple times that said, well, since the weather radios aren't there anymore. I just want to set that straight. Entergy did not pull back any weather radios. All the weather radios that were issued are still out in the field. The weather radio transmitter, which provides the service from the National Weather Service in Albany, is still located on Ames Hill, is still on the air, is still operating. In fact, there's individuals working with the National Weather Service at this time to even upgrade that service so it's even better. The weather radios work. They continue to work. They're going to continue to work. The National Weather Service is committed to keep them running, and that's not going to change. So when I hear the comments that the weather radios aren't there anymore, I think the proper statement is that Entergy is no longer issuing out weather radios and batteries. But beyond that, the rest of the system is still there from an all hazards point of view and still functions.
Absolutely correct.
Does anyone else on the panel have any questions? All right. Thank you, Scott and Glenn. That was very helpful. And I'm assuming we're going to have your presentation on the state website, correct, Tony?
Yes, anything that is presented here does get onto the website. It may take a couple of days at this point because the person who normally does it to me has just come out of surgery, but we'll get it out.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you guys so much.
We wish healing.
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah.
Now I just want to have a short conversation and talk about how we move forward and get either people's input or opinions, or if no one has an opinion, that's fine too. As I said earlier, the people from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection are going to be coming to the October 27th meeting. So I hope that everybody on the panel can come, because I think that's going to be interesting. They're going to talk about their experience with the row cleanup. Then the plan at this point is to have a meeting in November, and since Thanksgiving is the fourth Thursday, we will do what we did last year and do it on the third Thursday, which is November 17th. And the plan is to have sort of continue the discussion on site restoration that we start in October. I don't know exactly what the discussion will be in November, but it will be more Vermont oriented. And we have had a conversation between the state of Vermont and Entergy and me as chair of the panel to decide if this is, what we should do. So I think at this point, we'd like to do October and then go to November. I don't foresee us having a meeting in December, but the December meeting is scheduled for December 15th if we need it. What I would like to do now, and I don't want anyone to freak out that we are going to definitely meet in December, but I would love the opportunity to make that decision in October just to see if something comes up. I don't know what would come up, but instead of just crossing it off right now, just keep December on your calendar. No, we will try to make the decision in October. The things that we talked about this evening by way of topics, Jim brought up the withdrawal from the fund, the Decommissioning Trust Fund. Chris talked about site restoration, which is we're going to get in that discussion starting in October. Jim asked about the water, and Joe mentioned possibly getting Mark Walker to come up from Energy Solutions to talk about that. In addition, we have sort of the things that we're required to do, like an annual report. What I would love to do is get that started so that in November we can pretty much have it done, knock on wood, so we can look at that. Chris Campney has brought up that we will have a transition, obviously, to a new administration. We don't know what that means, but perhaps what we would do, and everybody can think about this, and maybe we can form a committee in October. Provide the new administration with a transition memo that we could include with our annual report. So we have to assume that the people that are coming in don't know who we are and what we do. I think that's a safe assumption. So we want to do something like that if people, think about that in October and who would want to be involved in that.
Oh, I was going to say it's also a new speaker, a new pro tem. There's going to be a lot of changes in Montpelier this coming year. So it'll also be informing we would want to inform the legislature anyway. There's going to be a lot of new faces. So.
Yeah.
But that will not necessarily affect membership of this group because we have terms.
Yes, the citizen members.
I believe everybody goes beyond the change of administration.
We do. The citizen members were staggered. Some of us, our terms are up in August 2017. The rest of us are August 2018. And anyone else from the state, they are on this panel because of the position they hold in state government. So the state people are here because of the position they hold. The citizens have staggered 2017, 2018, and pretty much the rest of you are on, there's a representative from Vernon, so it would be up to Vernon if they wanted to change. Steve, Wyndham Regional is on, so if you make your own decision whether you're on. David is on, and Diane's on because she's from the New Hampshire designate to the panel. So I think the biggest changes that we'll see right away would be who the state representatives on the panel would be, and we really won't know that.
We got along without them pretty well tonight, so.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think what David Andrews and I have been communicating, and what we'd like to do, with knowing that we're going to do October and November, and the subjects are going to be site restoration, have the issues committee get together and see within the time that we have within those two meetings what other topics we should talk about. And obviously what we'll do is look at these that we've discussed tonight. And I don't know if anybody on the panel has any suggestions or comments or anything that they're thinking about that they think we need to be talking about before January. And you don't have to know now. You can also tell us in October, but if we're only going to have an October and November meeting, just don't want to make sure we're not missing something that anybody thinks is important. Oh yeah, you can always send an email if you think of it when you're get up in the middle of the night tonight. Right, so does the October and November plan sound okay to everybody? Okay, that was simple. That was very simple. So think about if you're interested in helping with a transition memo or looking into that, and we'll try to get a draft of the annual report going so that we can have something really good for November. Oh, Jim's already volunteered. Good. So with that, does anyone on the panel have any other business before we take public comment?
I don't know whether it rises to the level of a note from the chair, but I would like to thank Congressman Welsh, Senator Leahy, and Senator Sanders for having spearheaded this letter to the NRC, and at least have it show up in the minutes that the panel thanks them. They obviously went to work on this.
Yeah, and Haley Perrow from Senator Sanders' office is actually here tonight. And for the people in the audience who don't know what we're talking about, our congressional delegation, along with the congressional delegation of neighboring states, wrote a letter to Chairman Burns of the NRC urging them to, how do I explain it, not limit what they talk about in the decommissioning rulemaking process. The Nuclear Energy Institute is come forward with a proposal that the NRC only look at a small number of issues in the rulemaking. So our congressional delegation has said, please don't do that. You need to look at it as a whole. And what we can do is I can distribute that letter. Maybe we can have Tony put it on the state website.
It's already up there.
Oh, perfect. Great. Thank you. Is there anybody else have anything else? Does anyone in the public have any other comments that they'd like to make? All right. Well, thank you. And the next meeting is October 27th, and it will be at the Vernon Elementary School.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn? All right. Hey, Lucy. I want to say goodbye to Lucy.